we are looking at chapter 14 and 15 this week. Just at your maps at the beginning. So last week we did the east. We did half tribe of Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben. Now we're going to look at Judah. The bottom map, this green section, is the fullness of Judah. We're doing the allocation of Judah this week. Okay. In the middle of Judah, if the top map, you'll see there's a funny circle. The reason it's not in the bottom one is because Judah gets allocated before that gets allocated. That becomes the tribe of Simeon. So Simeon is weirdly encased in the middle of Judah eventually. And then just one correction. Where that Jerusalem dot is sort of away from the line, that is not correct. It is literally on the line of Benjamin. So the Benjamin is this little one above it, of Benjamin and Judah. And you'll see it come into play just now. But it actually eventually I think becomes, it literally is the one wall of Jerusalem is in Benjamin, the one wall of Jerusalem it's on the border of Judah. So that's just, I just need you to know that it's actually not on there. Do you want a blanket, Sally? Here we go.
No, it's
no, come. And some soup.
Okay, I'm adjusting my line.
Yeah, please adjust it. I just beg your pardon that it wasn't correct on the map. Okay, so we're gonna get going because I really like to get through both chapters. So let's start at chapter 14. Now these are the areas that the Israelites received as an inheritance in the land of Canaan, where Eleazar the priest, Joshua son of, and it's pronounced Nun, not Nun, and because somebody says, oh, really? But we thought nuns couldn't have children. One of my kids asked, I'm like, no. It's son of Nun, and the heads of the tribal clans of Israel allotted to them. So basically what happened was Joshua got the priest, and he got the heads of the clans and said, come, let's sort this allocation out. The inheritance was assigned by lot to the 9.5 tribes as the Lord had commanded to Moses. So no, this is obviously the West Bank side that they're now doing. So remember the way lots were done it was the way God worked. In the New Testament, it changes because of the Holy Spirit. Lots are not used anymore. But there is favor on these lots that are cast. So it's not like what does God want me to do? Let's throw a dice. Let's not do that, please. That's not what this is at all. So they cast lot, but the way, if you go and read in Numbers 26, and I didn't want to put all that in here, but in Numbers 26 it says they were allocated the land. So you cast lots and it says, okay, you get this area. But the size of the area in Numbers 26, it tells us that was according to how many people were in your tribe. So it's like, okay, you get this spot, but because you're this big, you get this much of it, according to the tribes. Okay? And so, verse 3, Moses had granted the 2.5 tribes the inheritance east of the Jordan, which we spoke about last week, but had not granted the Levites inheritance along with the rest, which again we spoke about last week. For Joseph's descendants had become 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. The Levites received no share of the land, only towns to live in, and with pasture lands for their flocks and herds. So the Israelites divided the land just as the Lord had commanded them. Now, we get to verse 6. Now the people of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal. So now all of this allotting and these big decisions and announcements are being made at Gilgal. They're still encamped at Gilgal. That's where they are. So they all go to Joshua at Gilgal. And Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea, about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. And I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me had the hearts of the people melt in fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day, Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance, and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive the 45 years since the time he had said this to Moses. While Israel moved around in the wilderness, I was there. So here I am today, 85 years old. I love the way that they put an exclamation mark at the end of that. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I am just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. I love it.
Yeah.
Spunky dude. Now he says, now give me the hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out, just as he said. The Lord blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. So Hebron has belonged to Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. Hebron used to be called Kiriath Arba, after Araba, who was the greatest man among the Anakites. Then the land had rest from war. Okay, we'll carry on in a moment, but there's a lot of there I want you to get, but I wanted you to see the whole story. So Judah arrives for the allotment to get told where to go. And suddenly one of the guys from the tribe of Judah steps up, and we know him. His name is Caleb. And he's like, hello. Just before we start here, I'm calling in my ticket. God gave me a promise, and I'm calling in my promise. And I just love him. I think he's one of the most amazing characters in scripture. His name, interestingly, means dog. Caleb means dog or bold and tenacious. So when these youngsters go, hey dog, he was the first one that should be called that. But yeah, so bold and tenacious is what it means. And just a few things before we go any further. First of all, he was, going back to verse 6, Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, was a Kenizzite. Now, I want you to see in your verses that I've given you, get to the end of your Joshua passages, and your first passage is at the bottom of the page, Genesis 15. In the books, that would be
In the middle.
right in the middle, yeah. Genesis, on the day the Lord made the covenant with Abram and said to him, to your descendants I give this land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. The land of the Canaanites, the Kenizzites, the Kedemites, the Hittites, Perizzites, Raphites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites, hence why they all called the ites. Okay, but please notice that a Kenizzite was part of the Canaan Gentiles.
Okay.
So Caleb was son of Jephunneh, and Jephunneh was a Kenizzite. He was a Canaanite. He was part of that bunch that held that land. But, so you'll see that Caleb, though, was half Kenizzite and half, his mother was from Judah. Hence why he's part of the tribe of Judah. Okay, so there had been they trace back. If the theologians will trace back all the way to. Remember, Abram lived in Canaan before all of this. Remember this history all the way back. We have Abram living in Canaan. God says, "This is the land I give you." Okay, so going all the way back, God calls Abram, not a Christian, out from the Chaldeans. He says, come, follow me. He gives them this land, which is where the Canaanites now. When he got to that land, there were some people there. These were the tribes that we've just read. Those people were there. Then he grows his family, and remember, it's Isaac and it's Jacob, and he has the 12 sons, and suddenly Joseph goes off into Egypt, and there's the famine. And then that whole bunch move to Egypt. That's how they leave Canaan to begin with, leave that promised land to begin with. Now, with that is believed that a whole lot of those other tribes followed suit, because this was where the food was. They were in drought. They were in famine. So it was predominantly this nation, this family, but they believe that some of these guys, like these Kenizzites, came with. But we see that clearly intermarried into the Jews, because Caleb was a slave in the Hebrews, amongst the Hebrews in those days. So his dad had taken on the faith, married the mom, taken on the faith, and Caleb is now, dad was a Canaanite, mom was a Jewish lady from the tribe of Judah, but he is now seen as a Jew, even though he is a half and half. But it's really cool to see again how God brings people that are willing into the family. This is not just for these people, it's for anyone who would choose me. And clearly that's what's happened here. So we see Caleb comes out half Jewish, half thing. Interestingly enough, in a Jewish in the Jewish lineage, you always traced the tribe you came from on your mother's side, never your father's side, because the men were killed in war, and it just was confusing. So that, because that's why in Luke we get Mary's genealogy of Jesus. It's Mary's line. You would trace back the clan you were from on the mother's side. Interesting enough, after the diaspora, after World War II and the diaspora, most Jewish people today can't trace their family back to the tribe they're in. Sort of the only ones who know is if your name is Levi or Levite or Cohen, because Cohen means priest. Those were from the tribe of Levi. But otherwise, it's really hard for the Jewish people today to trace their lineage back. So we see Caleb as a Canaanite, but he has now lived he suffered. He was in slavery, because remember, Caleb comes from Egypt. He was in slavery with Egypt, and him and Joshua, they came out. They were part of the deal, and then they get to where he's selected. And the very first time we hear about Caleb, again, keep your notes where we are. The next verse down, Numbers 13, it says, this is the list. Moses is listing who he has chosen from each tribe to go send in as the 12 spies. So they're at Kadesh Barnea. Remember what's happened. They've left Egypt. They've wandered around for 2 years in the wilderness, and they've got to Kadesh Barnea the first time they're meant to be entering the promised land. And he says, right, I'm going to send a representative from each of the tribes of Israel into this land. Interestingly enough, we know every single name of those 12 spies. Who are the two names that we only know? They're all there. They're all there, but the only two names that stick are the two that actually listen to God. The others faded in obscurity. Anyway, so we see there in Numbers 13, this is the tribe of Simeon. We have whoever, and then from the tribe of Judah, Caleb, son of Zephaniah. So that's the very first time we hear of Caleb in Scripture, is when he is chosen to be one of the spies. He is representing the tribe of Judah. Okay, and then I want to read on, because everything that happens at this point in Caleb's life directly impacts where we are now and everything else that happens in his life. So I've got a couple of Numbers passages there. So they sent into this promised land now. Now this passage is about where they go, which is really important for today's reading in Joshua. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin to Rehob, near Leboth Hamath. They went into the Negeb and came to Hebron, and whatever, those places. But please note their names, because they're going to come up in today's reading. That Haman, Shishai, whatever, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, were there. Okay, so those three names and the descendants of Anak. Hebron was built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. They came to the valley of Eshcol and cut down from there a branch with a singular cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two of them, because that's how big the grapes were. A cluster of grapes. That's an impressive cluster of grapes. They also brought some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster that the people of Israel cut down from there. Okay, so we see they sent up to Hebron. Where they go and explore in spies is this Hebron region where these Anakites, the giants, were, and those three. Then Numbers 13 at the end of that page, it says, then Caleb silenced the people. So this is when they get back. Okay, and they all in a tiz about what they've seen. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take the possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. This is Caleb speaking. But the men who had gone with him said, we can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that had been explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. And all the people we saw there were of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Yeah. And then let's go to the next one, Numbers 14. Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes. Because now this other 10 are going, no, we can't do this. So now they react, and they said to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. And remember, God said, when they went in, God said, I have given you this land. Okay. Verse 9. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. But the whole assembly talked about stoning them.
Wow.
So we get a good picture of who Caleb is in this picture. He was like, come on, guys, we need to do this. He goes into the land, happy to see, but he sees it from through the eyes of what God says. He doesn't see it through the eyes of fear. He doesn't see it through the eyes of doubt and unbelief. He sees it through the eyes of God, and he is impacted by it. He's like, come on, we can do this. And we see that he's a man of courage. So that bold and tenacious that his name means, we see it come into play. He really is that. Him and Joshua make this big impact amongst the people. So going back to today's reading, he now says, okay, when we were at Kadesh Barnea, I was 40 years old. Now, do a little bit of math here with me. Okay, so he was 40 years old at Kadesh Barnea. He is now 85 where we are today. So the math is they had done 2 years already in the desert. Not so? So it's 40 plus 38 plus 7 years of fighting for the promised land gets us to 85. So that's how we get to where we are today. Okay? So that's why I said to you last week, write in 7 years, because that's where they get the idea, the thing that it took 7 years to take the promised land. Okay? Okay, so we have this Caleb who is, as I said, was a slave with them, had come through all of this, got to the promised land, went into the promised land, saw what God could do, was disappointed and devastated by the choices that the other 10 spies had made, and also just didn't see the Anakites and those things the way the others saw. Like, come on, God said we can take them. Like, this is, and so then has to wander around the desert while the adult men peg off, and him and Joshua were the only two that were left and were able to go. And now he's gone in, and he's been part of the fighting men. He has taken for 7 years. He's been fighting alongside. So the man has lived a full life. Yeah. He's not been sitting on his rocker at all in this deal. So, but now he gets to this place where you think, okay, he's gonna retire. He's like, give me my retirement. So they're allocating these lands, and remember the point of this allocation was they're going to get the inheritance, but they need to take the inheritance. They need to clear out what's in there. And I love what he says here. So he comes in and he says, remember, Moses made this promise, and I'm cashing in on the promise. And he says, I brought the good report according to my convictions. And he says, my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt with fear. However, I followed the Lord wholeheartedly. Now, he uses that about himself because, we see in the next page, Moses has used it about him. Because he says there, so that on the day Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord your God wholeheartedly. So he's going, Moses says, I will get this because I'm going to follow God wholeheartedly. I'm telling you, here I am, I have followed the Lord wholeheartedly, so now I'm coming to get what he said. And he said, I'm going to get whatever ground I've walked on, I can take. And I love what he says. So he says, I'm 85 and I've been through all of this with them. And he says, 11, I am still as strong today as Moses sent me out, just as vigorous to go out to battle now than I was then. And he's like, bring it on. Like I don't want to sit and retire here. Give me the land because I'm going to take it. I'm going to do what you've told me to do. And you see this about him. He takes God at his word and he does it. And that's basically the summary of Caleb's life. It's just like, God says it, he will do it, that's it. So, and that's why he can come and go, I want the promise, because I know God is faithful. If God has promised me, and we've navigated all of this together, and I've seen God move, and I've seen him getting us finally into this jolly promised land, I know that he will be faithful to the promise that he's given me. So now I'm calling in on that and standing on the promise that God has given me. So we see that he says, okay, I've been through all of this, and I'm still, give me the land so I can take it. Not give me the land so I can retire, which was a problem that a lot of the other tribes use. He's like, no, he gets the mandate. He's like, go in and take the land. Give me the land. And then he chooses which land he gets. And I just love his heart behind it. He says, verse 12, now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard, and then that the Anakites were there, and that their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out, just as he said. So what does he ask for? He says, you know, when we went in the promised land, that hill country that we were sent to, give me that land with those giants, because those flippin' giants are the reason that I have to wander around this desert for 40 years and have taken so long to get. I once and for all want to kick their butt. Basically is what he's saying here. He's like, give me the land that I set my foot, that was supposed to be ours in the beginning, and that I can stand against. So it's the land that they were given. Interestingly enough, then later on, 400 years from now, David stays for the first 7.5 years of his reign in Hebron until he defeats Jerusalem and takes Jerusalem. So it is still the running capital at that point, even in David's day. So Hebron is a big deal. Now, just let me give you the lay of the land. I think I've given it to you in your notes. Right at the back is another map. I try to give you the cross section of it. So Israel's an interesting country. Normally when you see countries, all the cities are built along the coast. You will see very few cities in Israel built along the coast. Anybody know why? It's a rough coast. They couldn't. There's Joppa. In line with the word Canaan there, it says Joppa. Joppa is still around today. It was a tiny little harbour that could take a dinghy, kind of thing. And that was the only harbour other than Sidon, which is right up in Lebanon. It just did not have a coast that the ships could come. There was no natural harbours. There was no place for the ships to come in. Everything later has been developed. But in those days, there was nothing. And so people did not build along the coast because they just, what was the point? So they couldn't get into the sea. They couldn't get out of the sea. And so the main places that they built in Israel. So this here is flat. This is what they call the lowlands, the Judean foothills. Then we have this ridge. This is the high ridge. And you'll see there's Shechem on the top of the ridge. There's Jerusalem on top of the ridge. And where it says Bible is actually the word English is Hebron. You'll see it all on the ridge there. So all the main cities are up on the ridge. And then on the other side is the Jericho, the basin. There's the Dead Sea, but above it is that fertile basin is that where the Jordan River runs, is in that basin. So you have the lowlands fertile, the hills, and then the basin. That's basically what they have at their disposal. And so most of the cities were in this lowland area here, because it was the fertile area. But Hebron is known to be famous for its, anybody? We've actually seen it because that's what they saw in the Promised Land. Grapes.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Even today, it is known for it. It is, over the years, they have tiered it. So if you go to Hebron, it's a tiered in the mountains, and it is known for their grapes. It's ideal climate for grapes, and that's what you will see and find in Hebron. And so it is not in the fertile lowlands, but it's still it is a great producer of many things. And so, as I said, he says, okay, give me that, and I will go and take it. And again, they weren't very popular for it, but now he comes back and he says, okay, give it to me. And he just, I just, as I said, I love his spunk. We're going to come back to him, but let's keep going. And it says, verse 13, then Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, with this Hebron as his inheritance, which is now we've just spoken about. So Hebron has belonged to Caleb and the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. So now 3 times in this passage, it says, what is the redeeming thing about Caleb? He followed the Lord wholeheartedly. Go back to your other notes, Joshua chapter 14, Numbers 14, sorry, at the bottom of that page. It says, you there? It says, but because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit. So again, this is a promise from God way before this comes about. Yeah. And God goes, because he has a different spirit. In other words, he doesn't do what everybody else does. He doesn't align with common thinking, or because everybody else is scared, let's all be scared together, or because this is the easy route, let's all do the easy route together. He's like, no. He has got a different spirit. And he follows me wholeheartedly. He does things God's way. So we see God speaking that over his life. And then across your page in Numbers 32, it says, because they have not followed me wholeheartedly, not one of those who were 20 years old or more, when they came up out of Egypt, will see the land I promised on oath to Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. No one except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and the Kenizzite, and Joshua, son of Nun, for they followed the Lord wholeheartedly. But more is that indictment in the beginning. The rest of all the adults, 20 years and older at the time, died in the desert because they didn't follow God wholeheartedly. And so, again, it's a lovely little line, but it's a big deal to God. Yeah. He blessed Joshua and Caleb abundantly because they did. And the people who didn't follow him wholeheartedly fell by the wayside, literally. And so it's that thing of going, okay, how do we navigate this? How do we live for you wholeheartedly, God, in this deal? Again, we'll come back to that, but I'm going to keep going if you don't mind. So verse 15, Hebron used to be called Kiriath Arba, after Arba, who was the greatest man among the Anakites. Remember the Anakites, the giants, okay? Then the land came to rest. Now, the next bit, chapter 15. The allotment for Judah. The allotment for the tribe of Judah, according to its clans, extended down to the territory of Edom, to the desert of Zin, and to the extreme south. Can we just stop here? So this is the first, so they've done the east side. He calls everybody to Gilgal and goes, here, first allotment I'm going to do is Judah. Why is this a problem? Remember, everything was done in an order, always. He wasn't the firstborn. Who was the firstborn? We discussed last week. Reuben was the firstborn. So he wasn't the firstborn. Judah was fourthborn. So it's very weird. You go, well, why does the fourthborn get first? In fact, Judah was... They used to camp next to the east of the tabernacle when they set up. When they walked in camp formation, Judah always went first. When they went into war, Judah always went first. Why? Anybody know? Let's go back to Genesis. You'll have to turn over your page, but we get to Genesis 49. Remember, these are the prophecy blessing things that the father gave over the tribe. And so this is what Jacob said about Judah. It says, Judah, you are he whom your brothers will praise. Which there's a prophetic word in that because Judah means praise. Okay? So first of all, that's what his name means, is praise. But he's going, there's going to be something about you that everybody looks up to you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp or cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the people, binding his donkey to the vine, and the vine's colt to the choice vine. He washed the garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. Okay. Lot there, but just let me navigate some things for you, just as to who Judah was. So, as I said, they were the fourth, but they always went first because they were the warrior tribe, the kingly tribe, and the law-giving tribe. That's why they went first, always. They were the lion motif with Judah. Jesus eventually becomes the lion of the tribe of Judah. He fulfills this prophecy. But already they are called the lion's cub, the one that is able to be led out and possesses great influence and can attack, can stand against, and is the one that brings law. So there's this picture. So scepter is the picture of the kingly tribe. We see the warrior tribe because of the lion. They're going to fight. And so there is this prophecy here that says, and as a lion, who shall rouse him? So in other words, he's the mighty one. They are this mighty tribe who are going to lead. Hence why they always went first. They were the warriors. They were the lawgivers, the one the kingly one. And out of that one would come the king. Okay? But here's this issue. So it says here, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. Just let me explain this a little bit quickly to you. Interestingly enough, remember when Rome comes, it takes over Judah. And it takes away their scepter. It takes away their ability to rule and reign over themselves. It takes their ability to be a law unto themselves, and the ability for them to sentence people. Hence why Jesus was sentenced through the Romans, not through the Sanhedrin like it would normally have been. So we have this problem because we have this seemingly to go awry, because it says this will never leave them until Shiloh comes. And so in the Jerusalem tumult, which is the church history of Jerusalem that is written by the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin, they write that there's a stage where suddenly the Romans take over and they no longer have the scepter. They no longer are the lawgivers. They no longer can do this. And they do this silent protest or march through the streets of Jerusalem in mourning, declaring that God has broken his promise. Because you said that this would never happen until Shiloh comes. Now, they knew who Shiloh was. Anybody know who Shiloh is? Shiloh was the understanding of Messiah. It's another word for that they prophetically use for Messiah. So their picture was here, they're like, the Messiah hasn't come and we've lost. There's no rule and reign. There's no law. Ironically, at this point, somewhere in that village in Galilee was growing Jesus. Wow. Working in his father's house, and a few years later he would come into this deal. So ironically, it didn't fail. God's promises did, because it says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And Shiloh had come the same time that they were running those marches when the Romans came and took it away. So we see again this prophecy comes true, and Jesus eventually becomes our king. He becomes our lawgiver. He becomes the one with the scepter. He is now the one above all that, and he is the one who is the Lion, the tribe of Judah. Okay? So it is really cool, and it again, not seen by the Jewish people, but from an outside perspective, you can see it at play. But this is why Judah was first up to get their allotment, because they were the driving tribe, the tribe that went ahead as the lawgivers, the soldiers, and the kingly ones. Okay, so let's have a look. Carry on reading. I can find my notes. So the allotment of the tribe of Judah, and this is basically a real estate contract that he recites here, according to its clans, extended down, and this is going to give you the I want to say the physical borders, the geographical borders, like the hills and the mountains and the whatevers, and he's gonna give you the outline of Judah, and we're going to keep it will go all the way down, and it says here the southern border, and it gives you the southern border. And it went down to the south to Kadesh Barnea. So it went all the way down, and that's where it makes that thing. Kadesh Barnea is here at that point, which is where they originally tried to get in the promised land, where they were sent from, the spies were sent from. So they're given the land all the way down here, all the way down to Kadesh Barnea, and you'll see them. It lists off all the eastern boundary to the Dead Sea. There's the Dead Sea on the side, and that's verse 5. And if you go further down, it says the western boundary is the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea, verse 12. So it gives you all the land dynamics that's in it. Just a few things I want to point out. I'm not going to read all of that, but just go to verse 7. Sorry. The boundary then went to Debir from the valley of Achor and turned north to Gilgal. Where have we had the valley of Achor before?
That was when Achor was one of the ones that they took. No? Hang on.
Achor means trouble.
That's right. Trouble.
And remember, so Achan, it was called trouble, the valley of trouble, after Achan, after he caused all the trouble. And then remember we read that eventually there is that prophecy in Hosea which says this valley of Achor will become the valley of hope in later time. So we see that all falls part of Judea. Go to verse 8. Then it ran up to the valley of Ben Hinnom along the southern slopes of the Jebusite city, that is Jerusalem. Once again, we're going to see they take everything, but they do not take flippin' Jerusalem. It stays a Jebusite city 400 years further from here. And then it gives you that whole long list. And then the western boundary, verse 12, is the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. These are the boundaries around the people of Judah by their clans. In accordance with the Lord's command to him, Joshua gave to Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the portion of Judah, Kiriath Arba, which is Hebron. So Kiriath Arba is another name for Hebron. It was called that. Kiriath, when you see it, comes up often in these names. Kiriath just means city or town. So it's the city of Arba. And Arba was one of the forefathers, but funny enough, Arba also means four, and they always talk about the four patriarchs that are buried in Hebron. So there is dynamics that are in there as well. So Arba was the forefather of the Anaks, the guys, the giants. And then verse 14, from Hebron, Caleb drove out. So now he gets it. He gets Hebron and he does what he says. From Hebron, Caleb drove out the 3 Anakites, and here's those names again: Sheshai, Iman, and Talmai. Remember, that was the guys that he tackled right in 38 years ago, well, further than that, when he was 14, he went in and he saw the promised land, and they came up against these guys. Now he goes and he goes, forget this. I am taking those 3 kings. I am taking those Anakite giants and their king and their towns, and he takes them. So he does what he says. He goes in and he defeats them. And I love it because he knows how God works. God doesn't work, I want to say logically. God doesn't. That's just not his style. Think of who he uses. Moses, who stutters, to lead an army. Think about Gideon, fearful man, to lead his army with 300 men against multitudes. Little David with 5 stones against Goliath. Caleb understands his God and goes, why would this be a problem? God's great with underdogs. Ironically, his name was Dog, so it probably helped with that one too. But he literally was the underdog, and he's like, I don't care. I know what God has said. I know what God's done. And he goes and he defeats those giants, the ones literally the ones that stood in front of him. And so he was this incredible man of courage and faith. And he was bold, and you can see it navigated out in all that he does. But here is this, I love this verse, verse 15. So now he comes up, he does what he says. He says, I'm not old, give me my stuff, I'm going to go and take it, I'm going to fight. He goes up at 85, defeats these guys that stood in his way in the first place. Then he goes on to the next town, because remember, he's now meant to take all the towns in his region. He goes on to the next town, but now he doesn't, one of the theologians talks about that both Joshua and him don't retire, they restructure. We see that with Joshua. Joshua has fought all these 7 years, comes out of it, and doesn't retire because God says, look, you're old. But he's like, no, I'm not going to retire. I am now going to lead the way of dividing up these nations and making sure my people take all of these things. With Caleb, he doesn't retire. So he goes in and he fights the first fight, basically does what he said he was going to do. These stupid guys that kept him out of his promise, he annihilates. But now he has to take the rest, and he goes, hang on. Then when he marched against the people of Debir, formerly called Kiriath Shepher, Caleb said, actually, I will give my daughter in marriage to the man who attacks and captures Kiriath Shepher. Now, I love this because suddenly you realize here's this bold, courageous man of faith. But it's not just about him. He wants it's contagious. As much as that fear was contagious back in the day, faith is contagious. And he's like, I want people around me to be people of faith. I want the daughter of my daughter's husband to be as faithful and courageous as I am. So he goes, okay, cool. Who will step up now and take this town of Debir will get my daughter. His daughter's name is Achish, you see there, and he'll give him in marriage. And so Othniel steps up. Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's brother, took it. In other words, he defeated him. He's like, I've got this, and he went in. And so we see this faith and courage, inspiring faith and courage. And there is this beautiful picture of the way that he lives his life, of going, no, that's who I want around me. I want people of faith and courage. And so his daughter gets a husband who had faith and courage, and acted. So Caleb gave his daughter Achish to him in marriage.
And also they were cousins.
Yeah, they were cousins. They were kissing cousins, yes. But don't forget, in those days, first of all, the family lines were true. They were still pure blood, and you worked within your tribe. You only had so many to go with. Yeah. And you weren't allowed at this point to marry anybody else. Interestingly, Othniel's name means God is my strength, or Lion of God. And just quickly, just a little bit about Othniel, if we can go to your verses. At the bottom of that Genesis 49 page, it says Judges 3 is talking about Othniel. It says, the Spirit of the Lord came on him. This is Othniel, this guy that Achish got. So that he became Israel's judge. In fact, he was the first judge of Israel. So in the book of Judges, he was the first judge and went and remember, judge in those days isn't judge sitting thing. Judge meant leader. The judges were the leaders of their times. They weren't the prophets that led in those days. It was the judges, the leaders. So he becomes Israel's first judge. So after the book of Joshua is the book of Judges. And Othniel was the first judge. The Lord gave him Cushan Reshmethin, king of Aram, into the hands of Othniel, that was a Mesopotamian king, who overpowered him. So the land had peace for 40 years until Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. So he was a great leader, a great judge, a great man of God who was filled with the Spirit. And we see him being a really great man. So we see that, people go, oh, how poor old Akshar. But Akshar, actually, we see that she's not necessarily unhappy. And because you're going to see who she is also clearly her dad's child. She's a woman of spunk and chutzpah and faith and courage. And she's okay with this deal, that she now gets a man of faith and courage. And so Othniel, son of, he takes his land, and then Caleb gave his daughter to Akshar to him in marriage. Read verse 18. It says, one day, she came to Othniel, her husband, and she urged him, go and ask my father for a field. Now, so he clearly does that and gets the field. Then it says, when she got off her donkey, Caleb says, what can I do for you? She goes to her dad and she replied, do me a special favor, since you have given me the land of the Negev. So clearly she got what Othniel asked for. Give me also springs of water. So Caleb gave her the upper and the lower springs. This is the inheritance of the tribe of Judah. Now, so it's this really cool picture because she's got spunk. She's like to her husband, go and ask for the land. Go and get that land, and then we're going to do something great with it, but we need springs. So I'm going to go and be proactive, and we're going to get the thing. And you can see Caleb enjoys it. He goes, cool, I'll give you the upper and the lower springs. They're in the desert. Don't forget where they are. They need that to survive. But there is this, for me, it's the most beautiful picture of faith begetting faith in others. It's contagious. We can see it, and they become, as I said, Othniel becomes this amazing leader of God, filled with the Spirit, courageous, leads God's people greatly. I believe purely because of Caleb, because of him being called out and stepping up to that, and them living these lives of faith. So it's really cool. I just think it's such a beautiful picture of even today, of the impact of generations upon generations. That as you live a life of faith, you impact the generations around you. It can be contagious. But unfortunately, so can fear and the ability to hide and the ability to not listen. Yeah. So, and then let's just go to the thing. So the inheritance of the tribe of Judah according to its clans. Now it's going to do, so in the first time round, it gave you the tribe of Judah according to the land features. Now it's going to give you the tribe of Judah according to the cities. So it's going to list all the freaking cities that they're going to get, okay? So there's over 100 cities, but I'm not going to read them all, but let's just do this on the first page. So it says, the southernmost towns of the tribe of Judah in the Negev towards the boundary of Edom were, and it's like, you'll see Beersheba is in the middle of that. You can see verse 28. Beersheba, list, and then verse 32 it says, Leoboth, Shilhim, Ain, and Rimmon, a total of 29 towns and their villages. Now, just for interest's sake, random, if you had to go and count those cities that I just didn't read in that list, there are actually 36 of them, not 29. So are they really bad at math? No. Beersheba being one of them, because it becomes the capital, 7 of those towns will be incorporated into Simeon. Remember I said Simeon is in the middle of Judah. So Beersheba becomes the capital of Simeon, and those other 7 towns. So what they have done is they've listed all the towns in that region, but then Simeon comes up, and we'll see just now next week, Simeon is given is given that land, and so 7 of those towns are no longer in play. They go to Simeon. So that's why there are 29. Random information, but just so that you know the Bible doesn't lie. Then there are many other towns that I am going to skip over. As I said, there are lots. You can go and read them, but go all the way to verse 62. This is right near the end of your passage. You there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's Nibshan, And then the city of Salt and En-gedi, 6 towns and their villages. Anybody know where that is? This En-gedi? Where does En-gedi lie? En-gedi is still around today. Anybody know? What part of the world are they talking about here? Yeah, Sally? En-gedi is next to the Dead Sea. Often people will go and stay at En-gedi when they go and visit the Dead Sea. So it's talking about, these are towns that are, this is the section that is against the Dead Sea that they're listing. And so hence why one of the cities is called, anybody tell me what's happened at Qumran? In Qumran. What's famous?
Scrolls.
Yep. That's where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves, remember? And so it was believed that it was from the tribe of Judah that wrote it, people who lived in the city of Salt and hid it in those caves. I know random information, but it sometimes just gives you bearing into put it together. Okay, verse 63. Judah could not dislodge the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem. To this day, the Jebusites live there with the people of Judah. So, to this day, meaning, in other words, Joshua's day. What did God say about all these lands, all these cities? He says, I'm giving you these allotted areas, and I have given you the people, and I've given you the lands. You can take them. So that line is actually, Judah could not dislodge the Jebusites. Probably is more true to go, they did not, or they would not dislodge the Jebusites.
Or they gave up.
Whichever. The point is that so many times of going, well, we could not. How many times have God asked me to do something? I could, and God's like, well, did you even try?
Yeah. I didn't try.
Because I told you can. And is it big? Yes. Is it difficult? Yes. But the point is that maybe you didn't because you wouldn't. Maybe because you weren't obedient is why you didn't get it. And we see this at play here. In fact, I gave you in your verses, if we can just go there, the 2 Samuel. And so this is now David. So we're now 400 years ahead of time. And then it says, when all the elders of Israel had come to King David at, where's he? Hebron. The king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. So he becomes king at Hebron. So Hebron is really a big deal in scripture. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah. Here we go. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem, he reigned over all of Israel and Judah for 33 years. Okay, very quickly. Do you know the history? I'm not going to go in too deeply. So you have the south, Judah and Simeon, and you have the north. Yeah? Remember there was a split, which is why it says that he ruled over Judah for so long. He was king over Judah, and then suddenly he rules over the north as well. Because remember there was that split, and it was the south became Judah and the north became Israel. So the 10 tribes became Israel, and the other there was Judah, and so that was the split. And later on in life, later down the line, the south becomes what they known as Judea, and the north becomes Samaria. So when Scripture says, "Go out and reach the world in all of Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth," it's describing all its people and beyond. Okay, so that's why he's leading different people. Did you see there? So it says there, so he led Judah for 7 years and 6 months from Hebron, and then in Jerusalem, because he now defeated both sides, and he reigned over all of Israel for 33 years. Okay, so then go and carry on in verse 6, and it says, the king and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites who lived there. So this is David now. He finally is going to attack with flipping down that they couldn't, would have, should have done long ago. The Jebusites said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off," like arrogant much. They thought David cannot get in here. Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, which is the city of David. On that day, David said, "Anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind who are David's enemies. That is why they say the blind and lame will not enter the palace." David then took up residence in the fortress and called it, hence where the name comes from, City of David, was Jerusalem, built up the area around it from terraces inward, and he became more and more powerful because the Lord, the God Almighty, was with him. And so we see that it finally is taken, but we see that relation to Hebron. Just before we end for today, and we're just about there, Caleb's life for me is really impactful. And there's things that we see that he does. He looks back, but he doesn't get stuck in the past. His past inspires him to the future. If you see what he's doing, it's because of what he knows happened there that he's choosing to do now what is in play. So we have this thing of he goes and he's like, I look back carefully from where God had brought him, but it wasn't a place where he made camp. He didn't get stuck in the past. And that's where, if you go forward a bit to those other scriptures, and there was, one page back from the Genesis page, Peter, where it says, in Philippians, it says, forgetting what is behind and straining to what is ahead. And that's the thing. If our past is good because of what God has done, I am where I am because of my past. Mm-hmm. But I can't get stuck there. I can't get stuck in the good old days. I can't get stuck in, well, that's who I was and I probably will never be that again. Caleb didn't have that mindset. He could see the past, but actually his past drove him to the future. Then we see, looking around candidly, he looks at his present, and he looks honestly at his present. He goes, I'm 85 years old. He's very real with where he's standing. He's like, hang on, I know where I am. But candidly, because I know of my past and I know where I am and what God's brought me through, I also know what the promises that are mine today. I know where I am, but I also know what's at my disposal and what God has said, and who the God that has led me thus far is well able to honor those promises. And then we see him, he courageously looks to the future, and he goes, because of that, because of who God is and these promises, I'm going to take this. And we see that thing of faith spelled R-I-S-K. He's like, I'm taking these little old man, I'm going to take these giants. And he does. And he does. And so for me, this whole passage of, here's this man who wholeheartedly served God. He's like, I'm yours, 100%. I've seen what you've done in my life, and I've always stood with you, and I'm not changing. And you've brought me through it all, and I'm still trusting you, and I know you're going to lead me on, and I'm still going to live from that truth. And I just, it's an amazing thing that, we always think of, look back to these men when they were young, or look at these men when they're old. But he was a man who consistently, whether you looked at him when he was young or looked at him when he was old, he was consistent in his walk with the Lord. He wholeheartedly served the Lord. He chose to see things from God's perspective and live accordingly. And sometimes that meant that because of circumstances and because of he wasn't popular, he had to end up where everybody else did and wander the desert. But God was faithful to the promises. And I think for me, this passage, it's a beautiful passage of God's faithfulness, but the calling for us to be faithful and wholehearted as well. Yeah. Of going, you know what? I keep my promises, and I am with you. I haven't changed from when you were young to when you're old, and I am still with you, and I'm still well able to do things with you. And so I just want to encourage you that what God has for us is powerful. That the same God that was with Joshua and Caleb is the God that's with us today. Yeah. And He's going, hello, I want you to be effervescent in faith and courage, that you impact not just yourself and the life you live, but those around you, like he did, his family and the other people around him. They became people of faith and courage, and that we as God's people will live wholeheartedly for him and live out in faith and courage to be an example. And there's no such thing about age. None of this was dictated by age. None of it. Sure. And God still used it, and yes, age brought wisdom, and so he brought other people on board with it, but he never stopped being who God called him to be. Anything in closing?
I'm just wondering, maybe jumping ahead a little bit, what happened to the tribe of Levi if they weren't allocated land?
So they were allocated. They weren't allocated land because God said, I'm your inheritance. Yes. So He says, God says, I'm your inheritance. I'm going to give you. So He gives them the meat from the pot. So because they can't have big herds like the others did and weren't farmers. God provides for their physical needs from some of the sacrifices, but they then are put in 48 cities. They're given 48 cities throughout all the tribes.
Okay.
To encourage God's people of going, hey, you worship and work need to coexist. This is about living real for God, and you get to worship Him and in the midst of your life and to bring. So their job was to bring the needs of the people to God in the temple and for bring God's truth to the people wherever they were.
Okie dokie.
Good. Okay, let's just pray. Father God, thank you that you never change. You are the same yesterday, today, and forever. And we thank you for the way we get to see that in Caleb's life, that you who were truth and was with him when he was young was still the God who was faithful to the promises that you gave him and empowered him even when he was old. And so God, thank you that we serve that same God. And Father, please help us to be people of faith and courage, like Caleb was. That we would be effervescent in that we would impact the lives of those around us. That we would call people higher to come and to live out the fullness that you have called us to. So God, thank you. Thank you that we can trust in and rely upon you. You are the God who is faithful, the God who is a promise-keeping God, a God who gives us everything we need for what is ahead of us and what is it you've asked us to do. So God, thank you. Thank you for who you are, and thank you for who we are because of you.
Yes, amen.
We love you, Lord Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Hi all. Sorry, this is Editing Mel from the future. Yesterday we had terrible problems with the filming, and what we had to do was restart the filming about 3 times, and in that we lost certain information. And this is me just to give you that. The first one we lost was, we spoke about Caleb wanting to go, give me that land, I want to go and take the Anakites, but he was keen on Hebron, because Hebron was obviously this lush land where they went to as spies, but it has a lot of meaning, especially in the Jewish nation, because number one, when God brought Abram from the Chaldeans into that area, he settled in Hebron. And in fact, when Sarah dies, he buys a cave where he buries her, and later he himself is buried there. Then after that, Isaac and Rebekah are buried there, and then after that, Jacob and Leah are buried there. And so even today, there is the monument and grave of the patriarchs, which is difficult to get to today because it falls in the Palestinian area, but it is still there. And those were some of the reasons. And then obviously, I think in the video I come in later where I was saying it was also where David obviously ruled and reigned for 7.5 years as well. So it was like the main city for a long time, just so that you get a bit of that background. And the other piece that is missing, that maybe just is a little bit confusing towards the end, when I talk about the city of Salt. The city of Salt is the name in the Old Testament, and in the New Testament it is called Qumran, which is then where they found, it is at the Qumran where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it would have been the people in Judah who lived in the city of Salt that ultimately wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. But anyway, hope that is helpful. Sorry about those clips, but have a great week. God bless.